Hey everybody, thanks for checking out Tactical Scrubs today. It's Mel again, and I am here with this awesome gentleman that I've been so excited to meet and talk to, Mr. John Oast. He is one of the newest members too of the I'll let you tell everyone the story about you and how you came to be and kind of what's going on in your life. But today we're just going to talk all things security like we usually do here on Tactical Scrubs. So everyone, Mr. Oast.
Thanks, Mel. I'm so excited to be here. Been looking forward to meeting you too. Not just via online, but
I
semi.
know you're in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I'm from right on the Maryland line, like Lancaster, like below Lancaster, right there
Ah,
below Delta, Pennsylvania. My family, my mom's family is from Altoona, Pennsylvania.
oh, that's very cool. That's not far at all. So when you come
No,
back, hook up and we'll catch up. Yeah, that's not too far at all. I mean, I'm originally from the Virginia Beach area, so
are
I'm just up
you?
here. Yeah, my wife's a professor at Bloomsburg, which is what brought us up here. Yeah, to me, the frozen tundra.
Oh
Uh,
my
uh,
God. It's cold now. I saw some friends were at like a Christmas thing and they were all bundled up. I was like, not for me, not for me. But Virginia Beach does Virginia Beach gets cold. I was there 2 winters ago. Was it 2 winters ago? Yeah, I took a travel assignment at Centera for 6 months.
Oh, yeah. That's
Mhm.
right down the street from where I grew up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
that's great.
Virginia Beach.
Yeah, it was 24 degrees here when I got into my car and came into work. So, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like 55 and raining in Texas and I'm panicking. So, I've survived the Northeast winters and now I get to choose. I have this magnet and it says not from Texas, but got here as fast as I could. Anyway,
That's
tell
cool.
us a little bit about you and kind of how you got into healthcare security specifically. One of the things I always tell nurses that don't know anything about healthcare security, which I was one of those nurses, I tell them they're like these specifically well trained gentlemen that just, and ladies that are incredible and so knowledgeable. So tell us kind of where you came from and where you got your start.
Well, like a lot of the others in my industry in healthcare security, my background actually came from law enforcement. So I grew up in Portsmouth, Virginia, which is right on the other side of the Midtown Tunnel from where you were in Centera. Grew up there,
Emporia?
went under.
You said Emporia?
Yeah,
There's like nothing there except for a Love's
yeah,
or something, right?
I lived in Portsmouth, Virginia, which is right on the other side of the Midtown Tunnel. I lived in Suffolk for a while. That whole neck of the woods. That's
I like
all my
Suffolk. Suffolk's nice.
yeah. That's my neck of the woods where I'm from. Uh, Graduate high school, went to George Mason University outside of DC. Then uh, eventually got into the law enforcement realm. Ironically, lived in Los Angeles for a little while, came back, met my wife. We were both teaching in Portsmouth Public Schools. She decided she wanted to go to grad school. Uh, I ended up going to work for Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, where I actually portrayed the sheriff. So I
I
was doing
love
reenactments.
Williamsburg. Williamsburg, I donate. I have like pottery. I if everybody listening has never heard of Williamsburg, Williamsburg is a colonial town and literally everything in the town is like themed for that time period, and there is even like they're building the buildings the same way that they used to back then. There's all these different shops and places you can go into, and then just down the street a little bit of ways are like modern pubs and beautiful things that you can check out. And if you have not been to Williamsburg, you have to go to Williamsburg. We try to go every year when we visit our family, and it's wonderful. I'm so excited that you work there.
That,
That's so
that
cool.
that is the best job in the world. No offense to everybody who works in healthcare. Uh, Most of the individuals that work there, a lot of them are either right out of college or retirees. Uh, but yeah, majority of the staff are in costume a lot. Like some of the times I were in character. I did court reenactments, did a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, there's a very large number of original 18th century buildings on the grounds. It's basically the whole town. is restored back to what it would have looked like at the time, and it's just an amazing place, especially if you're a history buff.
Oh, I
That
love history. I'm a big believer that history tells the story of how not to repeat certain things. And I think that if we don't know history, then we're going to continue to let our humanity fail us. And
hmm
I think that that's really, really important piece that I take from history. But I love Williamsburg. But did you do the witch trials where you're in the courtroom and then the lady's on trial for being a witch and you're like, oh my god, so cool.
Yeah, that was one of ours. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was one of them.
so cool.
I was up in the box with the staff and like, oyey, oyey, oyey,
Yes.
uh,
Love
with a
it.
wig.
You know, next time we do it, you do a chapter meeting, you're gonna have to like come in costume. And like John is gonna be our official, and it's gonna be amazing because we're gonna do it in costume. And I will gladly play the witch.
I'm glad you volunteered. I wasn't going to say
Thanks.
anything.
Put the nurse out there, but no. So okay, so you did security, you were teaching in schools. Your wife wanted to go back to school, so
Yeah.
and then
So she is a history professor at Bloomsburg University, which is one town over from where I am now in Danville, which is what brought us up here.
yeah.
I'd been in law enforcement. Started out with a couple of smaller departments and do a few things here and there. I left Colonial Williamsburg to take a full-time position at the Richmond Sheriff's Office. Was community relations with them, did all the community policing stuff, was one of our lead instructors at the academy.
My
Similar to what I
My
great.
dad's family is from Richmond. This is so funny that my mom's family is from Pennsylvania. My dad's family is from Richmond. He was my grandmother was a Pollard. So they had my grandma and grandpa had one of the like a big pharmacy that they used to run there.
Yep.
And
That's a
in
very prominent family there.
in Richmond. And so I remember I have a news article from when my mother, now I was adopted. So when my grandmother married my grandfather, it was on the front page of the Richmond Times and it told who was there, what they were having for tea, and, you know, and then what the women were wearing there in the 1920s. So that was really, really cool for me. And I love Richmond. Richmond is a neat population. They're really like booming and growing. Last time I was there, they had some really cool pubs and just some really neat infrastructure that was coming to Richmond. So what an awesome place to get
Yeah.
your start for like, you know,
Well,
big,
it was
huge
great.
systems management. Like that's a great, and no wonder you're so qualified.
But then that really is kind of very similar to what I do now. A lot of the regulatory side. I wasn't your typical cop. You know, I wasn't the ones that top cop go out lock everybody up. I did a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, a lot of the regulatory stuff, similar to what I do now. A lot of the academy training. My wife was teaching at Virginia Commonwealth
Mm.
University right there, just right on the other side of 95 from where my office was. And she was hired up here at Bloomsburg University. We came up here it was back in '09 now. Uh, and it was one of those odd, like the planets were in alignment. I looked in the newspaper and I'm like, they're hiring for I fish professionally on the side. A lot of the IHSS members know that whole side of me too.
You
But
fish professionally?
yeah, I do a lot of fishing tournaments around the
That's
country. A
so
lot of
cool. You're the coolest human. I love this. I I'm gonna make a T-shirt that says John Oast fan, and then we're gonna go fishing tournament. I'm gonna watch you. Can I watch you on TV on those flies? What kind of fishing do you do?
a lot of bass fishing. I kayak fish professionally on the BASS national tour. I do a lot of regional and local tournaments too on the Susquehanna and power boats. Do a lot of different stuff down your neck of the woods and too for
I
that.
love that. That's so cool. So you get up there to Bloomsburg, you see an ad for a
I
job.
the hospital, just working in Geisinger as a part-time officer because my wife's like, get off your butt during the winter time and do something when you're not on the road. So
Yeah.
I took a job like, and they're like, oh, you were a gang investigator and a fraud investigator, and you do all this stuff. I got hired as a part-time officer, and then wow, I
So
was in that position for 6 months and got promoted. Yeah.
When you went into healthcare, what did you think about that when you came into healthcare coming from that industry? What were your first couple thoughts? Because I know some of the other folks have said similar things like, oh my gosh.
It is, and we will all tell you the same exact thing. Every cop thinks they can jump right into healthcare and just coast. Healthcare security is the hardest job I've ever had.
I
Um,
agree.
it's it, it's that sweet spot between law enforcement, customer service, regulatory, you name it. It's a totally different animal. Uh, I know, for instance, we've got a number of former police chiefs that work for us now. And the statistics of the documentation and the things, I think working for a larger law enforcement agency really helped prepare me for this because we did a lot of trending and statistical research, which is more what healthcare does. Uh, so it was a very difficult challenge. Uh, Law enforcement, is basically you can arrest them. Sorry about that. That's actually, we have a system here where we get 911 notifications. So you might hear some beeps popping up every now
Oh
and
my
then,
God, if
whenever
you
not.
have to go, I'm all about it.
No,
Like,
no, no,
don't
no.
take
No, I
care of
just get
anything, but
a notification whenever they come in from anywhere in the system. It's just one of
wow,
our automated things. So,
that's
uh,
actually pretty cool.
it is we technology. So that's one thing too. So law enforcement prepares us for what we do here, but looking that we work with our state departments of health. We have, for instance, with us a joint commission, a lot of the regulatory side of it, the new workplace violence regulations. It's not just law enforcement where you can arrest somebody, maybe put them in jail, wait till they go to court, go to a hearing on them. Here you have to really, there's a lot more of the proactive side, a lot more of the crime prevention side of it, and then just the tracking and documentation of everything else.
Yeah.
It's a totally different animal, and
I
a lot
feel
of law enforcement think they can do it.
I
But
feel like a lot of security folks don't get the credit that they deserve. And that was really one of the points of why I started this podcast in the first place. We had to create a front forward facing brand, Tactical Scrubs, because I knew that in order to get the buy in from nurses, they weren't going to respond to that same type of demographic that I'm trying to pitch to healthcare organizations at an upper level, right? They're more of that employee day-to-day operations, frontline stuff. And I said, but they deserve to hear that there are people in the industry that are doing and behind the scenes what their organizations are doing for them to protect them, because out there it doesn't feel that way because we don't have a super strong emphasis on prevention. And I think that's why, as we look like as a voting member of the IHSS and, involved in that process, I look for people that have that type of experience because that's the type of thing that's going to help us move forward. And then I like to highlight that, that they do come from different industries and they are doing their best to support us, but it is a whole specialized professional arena that deserves credit. I mean, a lot of nurses and nursing organizations don't even know the IHSS exists. And to me, that's a significant problem because they are doing a ton of research. They're doing a ton of data collection. They're making recommendations. And I think my role is really to help bridge that gap and just let the world know, the clinical side, know how experienced and how valuable the security director is in your organization, and that should be a really collaborative approach. And I think that was one of the recommendations that came out of these new workplace violence recommendations that came a couple years ago. While I think we all agree that they're very vague because we really don't have enough data. And I think that was what from a clinical perspective, like I'm a critical care nurse. I, went to Towson University in Baltimore, Maryland, and did my Hopkins clinical at Hopkins and University and Shepherd Pratt and all the big boys up there, and then worked at many big institutions across my career, and I was able to see that like the institutions that did well were the ones doing research. Like they were the ones that were getting the data and then proving the data had validity or not, and then changing their practice based on that. And so I think, like you said, coming from policing to healthcare in the regulatory compliance, but also the research and analytics. And so what can I do as a clinician to help security get the research and the analytics, And so what we created was this standard approach to workplace violence, where it's like a rapid triaging system to teach the clinicians what to look for, when to look for it. And you guys were all the ones that gave me that data. Like I came to Eric Clay, I came to, Dave Corbin and Paul Sarnice, and I was like, hey, if you had a nurse really well trained, what would you want them to know? And I took those tools and those skill sets I used more, I think, of executive protection because of that customer service approach. I think they have a good mix of police tactics that don't always work in healthcare, because we have things like EMTALA where you can arrest a patient and take them out. Like we're treating them, we have to get them stable. So we have different things that make our hands tied. What do you think in your experience has been something that has allowed you to kind of help translate the experience you've had with the Richmond, police department and all your experience into healthcare and make it something that is relatable to your staff? Or are there tips that you could give people that are sitting in your chair so that they can be successful?
It's all about communication. Now, again, I come from a unique background too, because one of the many things I did was American Red Cross instructor. So I taught a lot of first responders.
Well,
I taught
that algorithm is we've created the training that matches CPR. So, oh my gosh, see, exactly. Continue. Like this is what
there's a
I'm saying.
lot. So I had the background there. I grew up, and I know I'd mentioned it a few times, and like when we were doing like some of the election stuff we did, and I know I did a couple of personal podcasts on it too. My background growing up, both my parents were extremely ill. From the time I was a young boy, my father had a brain tumor and had seizures regularly. Uh, One of the earliest memories I have was actually being on a boat with my father in the middle of the Elizabeth River, and he started having a seizure, and I had to get him back, and I was like 5 years old. And then I had my mother passed when I was a senior
Wow.
in high school with lung cancer. So I went to a lot of hospitals growing up. Unfortunately, and I saw the patient family, the patient experience side of it from a different side. So it was a little bit different than a lot of probably some other people coming into the field. And then working with the American Red Cross, when I first moved to Pennsylvania, I actually worked part-time for them as an instructor. So it's a unique perspective. But the thing that we really need to concentrate on is that outreach and the communication. I can't tell you how many times when I have conversations with nursing staff members or any ancillary staff within our healthcare facilities, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know y'all did that." Uh,
Right? They're
we
like,
did
I didn't
here,
know
and you,
that. I'm like, yeah, we do that.
yeah, they have no idea. Like they all we do a lot of different things. We have workplace violence committees. We have threat management teams. We do statistical analysis. We track number of hands-on use of force incidents that our security officers involved in. We have anonymous reporting systems. We work closely with patient safety. There's a lot of different things we do, but the line staff don't know that we do it. And again, they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So one of the things that I really try to do is get out the word and kind of preach the gospel of healthcare security, because unfortunately our executive leaders know what we do. Our regional leaders and site leaders know what we do, but our line staff don't. And we all know how hard it is to pull like the nursing team from an inpatient unit or an outpatient clinic to come and sit down for an hour-long training to go over active shooter training or de-escalation training. So what do? Everybody has to do it remotely on something like we're kind of like having a conversation now on Skype or Teams or something, or they have to do it remotely through an automated training program. But if we can get out there, at least come to shift changes and huddles and staff meetings and just tell them what we do, it really opens a lot of eyes to what we do. But that's really what it is. One thing that I think you'd really like is
that's a great idea, John. Like, I am a big proponent of the cookie cart. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like a little snack cart that you push around during different times, and there's educational things on it, and or the huddle. And that is really important because a lot of times I think when I go out and train to organizations, what I hear is I don't know my role and responsibility in workplace violence, and I don't know security's role and responsibility. And so if we can educate on who's doing what and how to do that, then we have a lot of the miscommunication and a lot of the issues where I say this as a reformed instigator nurse. I used to be that nurse that was like, what did you say to me? So I was the one that they were calling security because Mel had caused a problem with the patient. So I am that nurse. I'm the salty ICU nurse that you know all too well. Like, Mel's got another workplace violence incident. But it was because I didn't understand how my ability to speak and talk to the patient could directly affect the rest of the care team. I wasn't thinking about that. And kind of when I got better strategically at delivering my message and communicating with the patient, I was also able to deliver those messages to security better. And when they came to that response, whether it was my fault or not, we were able to pass information better because I understood their role and I understood their limitations. And as I started traveling and working with IHSS and working with my co-founder, he was sort of like, hey, when you go to a new assignment, talk to security and figure out what they can and can't do there. And that's where I saw that there was such varying levels of hands-on, not hands-on. Some security guards are employed by the hospital, some are out, from an outsource or travel agency. It's like who's doing what and what are they doing? And that's kind of where we got the idea of creating like at least a minimum standard of what everyone should have to do to keep everyone safe. And that's kind of why we've launched this Project Tact book, so that we can get the data. Like you're saying, not a lot of organizations are innovative like yours, and I'm sure you have a part in that, in saying, I need the data, I need to do this, because in order to get any type of change or get a handle on the situation, I have to know what's going on even when I'm not here.
right. I mean, one thing really innovative I think we did at Geisinger, we created a security nursing liaison. So we actually have an RN, his background, he's a U.S. Marine, but he's been at Geisinger now for over 10 years, and he's actually assigned to security. So he's one of our main instructors that does all of our workplace violence trainings, but he rounds through the system going to nursing meetings and shift changes and huddles and basically I mean, obviously, as we know, your typical cop versus your typical nurse, they talk two different languages.
Right.
They both use different acronyms. They are talking the same language, but they can't understand each other.
Right.
So with him, he can go out and say, whenever someone said, well, why does security do this or why don't they do that? He can go out and say, hey, I get where you're coming from, but here's what they do. And it's been a huge success because a lot of nurses talk to me.
Does he have his own FTE within your department, or how does that work?
He's an FTE in security. He's a Moab.
Fucking love it, John. That is brilliant. Who thought of that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great, and that was an idea. And honestly, to be totally honest and transparent, the idea didn't come from security. It came from nursing. It was our nursing leadership at one of our Danville, at our main campus here, our trauma center. It was the nursing leadership in a workplace violence committee that said, hey, he'd be great for this. He's already teaching this stuff at all of our nursing orientations. Why don't we assign him to security, and then he can go out and do a lot more of the outreach and help us get the information we need and get the word out. Again, my background is community policing, and that's what it's all about. I tell our officers, and talk.
That's the model. Yeah, I mean, that's the model that our program is. We get 25 seats. They can be security or clinical. We ask that they have some experience, either training CPR, ACLS, maybe they've done some, if they have the staff, and then they actually become those liaisons. They train together, security and nursing together, and then they go out and train the rest of the facility in whatever way they want, whether it's we're at bedside interventions. We've been called for a BERT team and we're going to coach them through it, or whatever it looks like. And I think that's a phenomenal model. And I think you're very lucky to be at an organization that's forward thinking like that. But I'd imagine Danville has a lot at their trauma center. They do see a lot, because I think the next biggest trauma center within the area, I used to work at Shock Trauma, University of Maryland Shock Trauma. So we do even get flights from northern Pennsylvania and that area. So I know I've definitely talked to some Danville ER nurses on the phone before.
I think we're lucky because I see it just with us because we have a number of hospitals, from small rural hospitals where we may have one security officer on duty to Danville where we may have as many as like 6 or 8 on duty at a time. So you're seeing the full gambit of it. If you were to consider our department law enforcement, we'd be larger than pretty much any little regional law enforcement agencies around here. That big in Danville. But then you figure the smaller ones, getting to get the input and get the access to your staff. We have a hospital in Bloomsburg. It's great. They've been teaching de-escalation training. All staff go through it annually. Every staff member, from the ED staff to someone who works in PR, go through de-escalation every year. And it's been what they've always done. But getting that rolled out at some of the smaller hospitals where we don't have the backup to do that, to break somebody free, that's been one of the challenges. So what I always say to our guys, well, if you can't get them to come to you, go to them. Go to their staff meetings, go to their huddles as you're rounding. If we can't pull them to do an active shooter training,
is so important. Rounding.
Talk to them.
If you are in a small hospital and you are the one officer on duty and you have to round, it is challenging because you got to report and do all that kind of stuff too. But rounding, and you develop trust and you are seen as a part of that care team, those nurses are much more likely to help you in a situation than just call you at the end of a situation where now it's you and you're like, I got to call the cops because this patient is out of control at this point. I think that collaboration from rounding it is really important. I think having experts like you that can see both the limitations and potential limiters of a small organization, but then have concepts that are coming from big innovative organizations, that's how we're going to be able to create systems change throughout the whole system, and not forgetting that it's not cookie cutter. One of the things that bothers me is these training companies that come out and they're like, we'll train cover to cover. You have to teach what we tell you. It doesn't matter that you don't have the staff to do that, or it doesn't matter that you don't have a person to even fulfill that role. That's not fair to those organizations, and I think that was the major struggle that JCO and regulatory company bodies had about recommending solutions. Like, what do we do? And I think that's where our program was born. Like, if I can go into a clinic with an outpatient clinic or a standalone ER, what are the things that they can afford and we can teach them that will also work in its minimum at a large level 1 trauma center?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I know that the big thing, and I'll be a little transparent. About almost exactly a year ago, we had an active shooter engagement issue on one of our campuses. Since that, we've been teaching active shooter trainings about once a week across the system. Lots of trainings. The big problem I've seen is, how do you capture the staff? Yes, we can do it remotely. We can do it on like independent training program, like automated training. But until you have them, you're face to face with them in a classroom, in a conference room, showing them, letting them look at simulated firearms and what would you do with, and blocking doors and barricading. It's going to go in one ear and out the other. But how do you do that when you have we all know the staffing issues that everybody has in healthcare, or not just in the healthcare industry right now, to break staff free. And not only that, where do you do it necessarily when you have a 24-hour operation, say at an inpatient unit or an
And that's
ICU,
where,
where staff
and
and
that's
hey,
where
everybody.
innovative training, I was an ICU nurse. I was a night shift nurse for a long time. I was the one that was left out of training, and I think that's where having an innovative approach and allowing the organization to train who they want to be trained, allow and then give them those recommendations. Like when we go out and train, we trained a facility here in Texas, and we trained about 180 of their employees for something that they were doing. And we offer training from 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. We had a 2-hour open room. So we do a hybrid immersive approach where they do adaptive learning online, which is just, it's different than the click through modules. Like they have to answer the questions. Their scenario is different. Like my training would be different than your training, John. And so that way we can't really copy off each other. And then once you finish those online modules, and they're short 15-minute modules that you can take on your phone while you're sitting, doing laundry or whatever you need to do at home. And then you have a 30-minute skills lab where you come in, you can drop in, and they run that all day long for 2 days or something like that. So that people can just drop in, do their check off. They know what they need to know. They've been simulated the things that we essentially want to simulate for them. And then they can move on. And being conscious that sometimes we'll have to train at 5 a.m. because that's what time the nurses have some downtime. Or maybe that's the time that we come in at 11 p.m. or we're there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and we do a lunch and learn, or we're out on the floor and we just happen to see, well, there's an incident going on. Like say I was in a hospital with someone like you and you said, hey, Mel, we got a 911 call. You want to come watch? I will watch and see how people are responding to that. And then from that can make my recommendations about, okay, this is the easiest way to scale this type of training, or this is how we should be teaching in this moment. And using kind of standardized verbiage and standardized approach, no matter where we're at. That way, if I, as a traveler, am going to move from Danville to Virginia Beach, I still have that same approach. And you as a security director, okay, she's already been trained. She's good. She's going to approach this in the same manner, at least at the minimum, to keep her
Right.
safe and to keep someone else safe. And then on top of that, we can build on the additional training that whatever that organization is pushing out. So I think you guys are really innovative from the other organizations that I've heard from, and make you an excellent candidate for your new position. And we're very excited to have you. I know that a lot of people, your reputation definitely precedes you in the space. And so tell us a little
Thank you.
bit about that. I want to hear about that process and how you, look, my dryer's done, and how you guys got to the point where, or how you got to the point where you were thinking about running, or why you ran, and then what kind of your hopes are for your position.
Well, I've been involved with IHSS for quite a few years now, at least probably 10 years now. Uh, I had some very strong mentors within the Pennsylvania chapter. My boss for a long time was Scott Bidding. I probably wouldn't even name them all, but like Alan Lynch, for instance, who's also now, he's retired. Now he's a Joint Commission surveyor. There's been a number of them. Tom Mason, a bunch of those seniors. So I was at this point where you had again, healthcare security. How long has the terminology been around? I was able to get in at the point just over a decade ago and mentor under some of these people, right? That were ones that really created the foundation for everything we're building on. And now we're seeing a lot of that as we see a lot of the baby boomer generation retiring. The next generation is moving in. I got involved with the Pennsylvania chapter, the Susquehanna, Pennsylvania chapter. I've been chair of the chapter for a number of years. Was involved in the commission on certification with IHSS and did some other things on a national level. And then just getting to know the senior leadership within the organization and going to conferences and realizing we're all in this together. And very rarely can somebody at one healthcare organization experience some type of challenge that someone else ever hasn't had. And knowing
Exactly.
that we can either have a national level meeting, like we can do some of our SIG groups, our special interest groups with IHSS, and we can round table and openly discuss it. It's such a much closer knit organization in the industry where it's very sharing and where everybody's compassionate for each other. And that's, again, coming from my background, that I love it. I just felt drawn to it and I want to give back. Uh, so just like all these old school guys, I guess you'd say, kind of showed me the ropes. I want to give back as much as I can to IHSS and to the IHSS Foundation because it's how the whole organization, not just IHSS, but the industry is going to grow and develop, learning best practices from each other. If I've got a program I've been working on and trying to develop a training program, and someone from other organization from the other side of the country reaches out and says, "Hey, how are you doing this?" I'm going to help them.
Yep.
Because I know that, because people have done it for me.
Yep.
Why reinvent the wheel? And that's why I love IHSS, because you can go into any meeting and everybody just shares their ideas and their information and their knowledge base.
Oh my gosh, it has been incredible. Like I have never seen another organization like it. And I think some of it does stem from those like military and police and fire first responder roots. Like we do take care of each other. And I think that, and ultimately when you're out there, the patient outcome is going to be the patient outcome. But when you're out there, you're really doing it for whoever's next to you, working with you. And I see that from the IHSS, and I see like I came out there as a learner, right? I was like, I don't know anything about security. All I know is about nursing and that what I've seen, and I know that there has to be something better. And I always say, if I'm the smartest person at the table, we're at the wrong table. We're probably at a table of a sinking ship if I'm driving. Like, this is going to be awful. So I tell people, tell me what you've learned, tell me how I can help you. And then just being able to translate all of the awesome knowledge that you guys have to the bedside and say, hey, like, these are best practices, this is what big organizations or better functioning organizations are doing in this space, and how can we create a solution. And IHSS has been so impactful and so empowering, and they've supported me. And I think that they have really come out as just impressed me with their knowledge. Some of these guys have like PhDs, and I mean, Eric Clegg has went to school longer than I think I've even been alive. So, you look at people like that, and they're just, their knowledge and their background and their ability to just connect you. I love that. Like, I could be in the gym and someone would call me and be like, Mel, what do you think about this? And I'll be like, that's bullshit. And they're like, I thought so too. I'm going to tell the executive team, or like, that was a great idea, or who do you know in this space? And it's just been incredible as we've started building out Tact Book. Has just been this huge network, which I would love for you to join. I think you would be such a great resource to us as we move forward. Yep. And try and really leverage the nonprofit status to try and get research. And that's really what we want to do, is find innovative folks like you and organizations like yours that are doing something new, and that new approach, like the nurse that's on your security FTE. Like, what does that look like? And what is that doing to the rates? Is that helping with your retention? And is it helping with your recruitment of staff? Like, what are the things that security needs to be seen as a value add, not as a revenue taker, as it has been seen in the past, because it truly does add a ton of value to these organizations.
Yeah, the IHSS just means everything to me in the industry, and just being able to give back. And like I said, it's like the perfect mix for me, not just law enforcement, but physical security, helping people stay safe, but also giving back to the community.
Yeah,
I mean, it's public service.
Oh my gosh. IHSS and healthcare security is, like, to me, the highest and degree and most difficult place of public service and security, because your patient population is extremely vulnerable. You can't do the traditional run, hide, fight, or get people out of there. You can't evacuate folks. Like, it is a very difficult area to operate in, just in general. And then you've got the melting pot of clinical issues, psychological issues, families are coming in and out. It's like a giant airport that's full of people that are not excited to be there. Nobody's going to Disney World, like unless they're having a baby. And even those instances can be very, very traumatizing and detrimental sometimes. So, I think that you guys have to really have your head on a swivel, and you have to be so innovative and alert. And it really is a level of industry that deserves the respect and authority that you guys command in your presence and in your ability to do that. And I think nursing and clinical has to support your role in the same way that you've been expected to support us for so long. It's always been, oh, that's just security. Oh, that's just security. Like, now we're seeing a focus on it. And I think that our role as clinicians is to help support you all in your job as well. So, what are some things, I guess, that you found to be helpful in addition to communication, but from your clinical leads, like maybe your CNOs or your nursing managers, that have added to your ability to enhance security? If you could think of some things that, other than the communication aspect, or is that really the most important part, is keeping those lines of communication open?
Honestly, 99% of failure is a result of miscommunication. I mean, honestly, and there's been a lot of our executive leaders that have supported us. We're working on transitioning into a sworn law enforcement agency. So about 10 to 20% of our officers across the system will be
That's
sworn law
so
enforcement.
great, John. So pause for a minute. Talk about why that's important. Me and you know why it's important, but some of our listeners may not know why an organization may want to shift to sworn law enforcement.
It is such a complex issue. I start off with the whole use of force continuum. All right. So you have the two different ends of use of force. You obviously have a clinical use of force and you have a law enforcement use of force. So if you're a clinician, if you're a provider and you're asking us to help restrain somebody, that's one thing, it's a clinical use of force. But at what point do you have to cross that dotted line where it's no longer a patient issue and now the person's becoming a criminal doing something illegal? You have a lot of hospitals around the country, like especially in our area, where you may have a very small law enforcement agency in the jurisdiction. You have some within our jurisdictions across the state of Pennsylvania where some townships don't even have a police department. They rely on state police to respond. So having someone in-house that has those extra tools in their tool belt, I'm not even just talking physical tools, I'm talking about the authority to charge somebody, to cite somebody, to give a summary offense. It gives you a lot more. I mean, how often have we heard over the years where somebody is being a total butthead, a visitor, and you say, sir, ma'am, you need to leave the building now. And they're like, oh, you're a bleeping rent-a-cop. I don't have, it's a public place. I'm like, private property, you need to leave. But now if we actually, have that law enforcement authority behind us, and again, a lot of organizations do. I have to, acknowledge some like Tony Pope. You probably know. Again, I've taken a lot of advice from him. Some of our other organizations around Pennsylvania too that have done this, and they come with a Pennsylvania where we have what's called Act 501. So if you're an educational institution or a nonprofit, you have these ways that you can go and get sworn to be law enforcement. So all of our officers are going to be former or current sworn law enforcement officers with a background in it. We're not just going to swear in every single security officer because there's going to be a small number of them. So I have the physical tools. But for instance, you have a patient that happens to come into your ED. It's the patient does something highly combative and confrontational and assaults a staff member, punches a nurse in the face. Okay, it's not necessarily a behavioral health patient. What do you do with the patient? So you get law enforcement that comes in, they're going to be like, okay, well, we didn't observe it. You have a staff member that may or may not want to press charges. Now you have a security officer that's sworn, is now a police officer. It gives you a whole lot more of those tools. Now, not only that, the way we look at it is you can either arm a non-sworn officer or a sworn officer, but having a sworn officer, it gives you, to be totally transparent, a little bit more, you know, some more oomph behind you with the liability side of it. You're now
Yes.
sworn. But there's a lot of factors that go along with it.
So from my side, that's kind of when I came in 4 years ago and started really doing research about all this, right? That was why I reached out to Michael Hovelman, who is the former head of SpaceX security, and he has Paratus Investigations and Training, Critical Skills Academy, and he trains level 4 officers, which we know sometimes level 4, the ability to plainclothes carry, they have a little bit more training than even sworn officers because they have higher standards in some states. So that was one of the things I was like, look, if we're going to get a handle on some of this violence, not to mention that 1 in 4 shootings in an ED happens because someone gets an officer's weapon. We have to teach weapons retainment, and then we have to have the ability in that state to provide the organization with someone that can make arrests or can make that judgment call about where the line is. Because right now, a lot of facilities, the nurse says, hey, I need help injecting this patient, but security doesn't have any training for hands-on or use of force, and the training that they do have is really outdated. And there's a lot of techniques that we're using now, like I always tell healthcare organizations, pain compliance training, not effective in a psych patient or someone on drugs, because if you're going to break my finger, go ahead, because you just made my day. Because now I'm paranoid, and you've proved my paranoia that you want to hurt me, right? So a lot of times those things don't work as well. So what we're seeing, I think, in the industry is a lot of organizations like yours will be moving towards where they have sworn officers, or at least that capability. And that's one of the reasons why when we started our training program and everything that we were doing, I was like, I need somebody who can say, yes, like it's appropriate for your organization to have this because of where you are or your demographics or whatever's going on. And these are the people that can get you there efficiently and quickly. And that's one of the other reasons we formed the nonprofit, was because now we can apply for grant funding. We can do some other things to help support those organizations that don't have the revenue in place to upgrade their security training. And then, of course, there's been the whole conversation about weapons and carrying weapons and not using. And that's why I think Canine is a great solution for healthcare. And I found this company, I don't know if you've heard of them, they're called Canine X Factor. But before, for me, having Canine in Baltimore was like a normal thing, right? But you couldn't pet the dogs, like the dogs were working, you couldn't go near them. This company is executive protection based. So they create family dogs. So the dog is made to be in the family or in the organization, is actually raised from a pup to be for that organization, which is a great branding and marketing tool for healthcare and retention and recruitment. And then the nurses and everybody, people can actually pet the dog or be interactive with the dog. But when the dog is ready to work and is given the command to work, they will work. So that to me is like the perfect collaboration between patient experience and security. And I think those type of innovations are going to be the ones that really stand out in the future as we come along. And I was really excited because there's a lot of facilities that can't afford or don't want the liability of someone having a weapon, but then have a weapons detection system. And I'm like, look,
Yeah.
if you're going to have someone pull out a gun in front of you, the only thing that can stop them is a gun. Or now we have the ability to have that officer armed with a dog. And, I think that that's a great idea for those organizations who are kind of stuck in that the board says no, but we know we need it. I think that's a really hard position to be in your chair, is when the board tells you no, but you need something. How do you navigate that space,
Yeah. Again, there's your communication piece again. And dogs. Now we have 2 dogs across our system. One is specifically a bomb and accelerant dog, and the other one is a firearm dog. So they're both trained in that aspect. Neither one does bite work. So they're nice, basically therapy dogs.
Right.
One is a German Shepherd, so obviously just having the dog walking through the hall with a uniformed officer is a deterrent in itself.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
but my favorite thing I'm full of one-liners, right? The one that I've always taught ever since I was an academy instructor 25 years ago was they're not all bad people, they're usually good people having a bad day.
Yes.
That really is a
Yes.
hospital.
Yes.
You have a patient that comes in, that same patient right now could be giving you the worst attitude ever, but this morning you might be been at the grocery store behind
Yep.
them in line having a nice conversation.
Yep.
You walk that dog through there with them, it's probably good. They're either going to want to, pet the dog or they're going to be deterred by the dog.
Right.
So that's been great. And we all actually use mutual aid with other law enforcement agencies around the state. And the dogs are going to, search facilities for bomb threats or help out at graduations for colleges and high schools and things like that, too. So it's a great outreach.
Yeah,
So,
it
yeah,
is. It's a great
there's lots
tool.
of things outside of
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
a great tool. And we have to start looking at revenue and fiscal responsibility in a long term effect instead of just reactionary. And I think that's one of the things that I have found when I'm speaking and engaging with organizations on this side as a nurse, a clinical workplace violence or whatever the fuck. That part, these are the things that I tell them. Like when your security director is coming to you and telling you, I need this, then it is your responsibility as a team collectively to figure out how you can make money from it. And that's one of the things that is great with the dog collaboration and being able to source that to the community is such a valuable resource, and I think I always say I'm another one liner, maybe two, but security is not the absence of threat, but the presence of connection. And healthcare is very disconnected right now. We've got systems issues, we've got staff that are really upset, and we can't fix those things. You and I, we're not going to fix systems issues, right? We're not going to procure staff and make them stay. But we can be experts in our industries and experts in our field that will allow other people to see the quality. And people want quality. And whether they're looking for a place to work or they're looking for a place to seek care, or they're just stuck at a place and have to get care there. Quality and attention to detail are the things that separate a really good organization from one that's struggling, and being able to teach the nurses and the staff that are a lot of times out there now with no senior staff to teach them professionalism. And that's kind of where we get a lot of this patient generated violence, because if I've been a patient for 30 years and I've got a nurse who's 6 months of experience and is telling me how to do something, and I know that not to be the way to do it, we're going to have an issue. But it's all about tact. If that nurse can rely on her skill set and the training that she's had to be able to say, no, sir, this is a new way that we're doing things. Here's the research, or here's the why. A lot of times you can, by over communicating first, you eliminate a lot of the issues that you will see in the future. So I am so excited for you and your journey, and we need more people like you. So I'm grateful that you did run, and congratulations. What
Yeah,
position do you hold officially now? What's your title?
none right now.
None right now. None right now.
Yeah, so as of the first year, I'll be member at large for IHSS.
Great,
Yeah,
great. Well, I think you are a perfect fit. On the record, I'll say I voted for you for sure. I really,
thank you.
I looked you up. I was like, I don't have much power, but I was like, I have at least a vote. And I have seen such amazing people, launch their careers with IHSS. And I think what you're doing there in Danville and with your organization is so important, and it needs to be on the forefront of the research that we're doing. And I'm excited to talk to you more about getting involved with that and how we can help each other. And but if anybody needs advice or anybody wants to reach out to you, how is the best way to get in contact with you?
You can probably, the easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can give you my email address, but if you
Oh,
just go to LinkedIn and look up, everybody's got it there. So I mean,
yeah, the
it's
stuff that you've been putting out on LinkedIn, the articles and everything, I love it. I like wake up and I'm like, let me read what Eric Clay says today. Let me read what John says today. And then I can understand where we're at and, help me to navigate to help my nurses. So I really appreciate
it's
the time.
it's about knowing what's going on in the industry. I mean, my big thing is I don't ever want to be blindsided. So the worst thing I'd ever want is for somewhere to have like a shooting at a hospital somewhere in the U.S. and I or my boss is walking to a meeting and someone says, "Oh, what are we going to do if we have a situation like happened in whatever state?" And I'm like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" So again, you learn from the experiences of others. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And that's really what IHSS is all about. That's why I share all this information online. It's not to put down any organizations, it's to learn from their experiences and to use best practices. So that's why I share it all. And it's kind of one of those things where I kind of created a monster. So I'm now like over 11,000 followers or something silly on LinkedIn. But it was because I was getting these newspaper articles and media articles and YouTube videos, and I was putting them on there just for some close friends and for myself to kind of like keep like a library of it. And then it
Mhm.
kept getting shared, shared, and shared, and shared. That's kind of how it, got to where it is. But
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I check out your page all the time to know what's going on. I'm like, John probably posted about it. Let me see what article he found. Because you never know. Like sometimes they're coming from like really sponsored articles. Sometimes they're coming from news agencies. And like sometimes there's people writing them that like, for instance, the Washington Nurses Association just put out that article with all the instances that had been reported. And as someone who works like on both sides of the fence, I guess, I was like, you've really hung the laundry out to dry for people, especially like the director of security there and other people, and then not presented a good option. And then when I called to be like, hey, we would love to support you guys with some training, like we have what these nurses are asking for, I was immediately dismissed. Like, no, this is a systems problem and they need to fix it. And I'm like, they're trying. Like, what makes you believe that that person that's in that office in the security director's seat, or the officers that are there, or the police that are there, or all the people in administration aren't concerned about this? Like, I'm sure they are. Like, but we have to figure out a way. And it really does start with equipping people with the knowledge to avoid a lot of those situations, which were avoidable with the right training. So I'm hopeful that, as we move forward, there will be more influence for collaboration and less of pointing fingers and blaming. And that's what I love about IHSS is like no one blames another person, like you were saying, for lack of or potential limiters. It's like, how can we help each other to be successful? So we encourage everyone to become a member of the IHSS. I think it's a great organization. There's tons of value there. If you want to get in touch with John, make sure you're following him on LinkedIn because he does have the latest news out there. And it sounds like he's at probably one of the most innovative security departments that I've seen for sure in the industry. So thank you so much for your time, John, and we will definitely be chatting soon. Next time I'm up there in the winter, it won't be the winter. I will be up there in the spring or maybe the summer, but but we'll have to get together. I would
Yeah,
love it. I think it would be great.
yeah, thanks, Mel. Yeah, come in. We'll give you a tour and show you around town and around the hospital. And
I would love to
yeah,
meet that nurse. That would be so cool. That nurse that works for you.
absolutely.
Oh my gosh. I think we would have a great conversation and that
Yeah,
would be so
it's
fun.
it's an eye opener. Or yeah, what he's like. I had no idea all this stuff went on behind the scenes.
Good.
Exactly what
And
it is.
that's
You don't know what you don't know.
exactly. And we're here to educate as many people as we can. And you're doing a great job at that. So thank you for
Thank
your
you.
service and your continued service. And we will chat again soon.
Thanks, Mel.